Hello. In this video, I'll be talking a little about audio recordings in hypnotherapy. And the question is if audio recordings really work. It depends what is really meant with this question, but before I start exploring some possibilities, let me quickly say that for years already, I practice this approach in hypnotherapy that does not involve recordings, nor a homework for that matter, because through experience and different trainings, I have learned that what is generally thought to be achieved through a recording, which I'll speak about in a bit, in organic conversations in hypnotherapy, is worked out during the session through testing the outcomes that naturally emerge from us and the client together exploring the problem, which at the same time enhances the integration that has already organically happened throughout the session, and only some conscious tasking that in OCsH does not involve a typical homework, which otherwise rarely people do, to my experience, like listening to a audio recording, meditation, or journaling is added. But as I can't possibly include everything in a single video without you experiencing it somehow, I'll go back to the original question, and you're invited to think it out for yourself. Now, the question was if the recordings really work. Now, thinking about the general idea behind the audio recordings, what hypnotherapists hope to achieve with these recordings is usually for the session's result to stick. I say usually because there's a place and time for those things sometimes, but that's a whole another topic. Now, let's get back, and the main word here is hope. Now, think about this. The less the therapists hope, but instead stick to exploring together with their client until the person untangles their thinking and starts to have more clarity in seeing their own solutions that during the session come from places that usually they'd forgotten they exist or did not have a reference point at all about, but still become more clear of possibilities, the faster the client's initial hopes to solve a problem become a reality. Now, the other thing that may arise from this is that the therapist would attach their whole brilliant work of a session to depend on something that is out of their control, or for that matter, also out of the client's control for it to stick, or the result to stick. Now, with this, I'm not saying that we aim for full control. That would be another extreme, because if something is out of our control, it is out of the control, and we can't allow ourselves to worry about those things. But we are still the only species, let's say, that have some conscious choice in their hands on matters. We sometimes forget about it, but more aware we become, the more the natural capability of having a choice is presented to us. So what I'm saying here is that we have both the rational mind and the automatic behaviors, let's say, that some are running on naturally and others are influenced. And sometimes those that are influenced are not always in our best interest or favor. So we want to find ways to untangle those defaults that no longer serve us so we can experience more qualitative life, let's say. So the first implication, if we are attached that the results depending on those recordings would be, no matter how good they are, if it happens that the result do not stick or the client does not listen to the recording, we will start blaming it on the recording or try to make the client listen to it. And the irony of that is that we have gone so far from what we really wanted or started doing in the first place. Now, if you're already coming from let's say, a school or a training that gives homework, first thing is using common sense, and that is you should at least consciously know what that homework will really achieve. If you're a new hypnotherapist and have one thing that you know for sure, that is great. But the best teacher is real life experiences, in this case, meaning apart from the practice sessions with your peers, working with real life paying clients, with real problems, and that is because the paying clients usually have better motivation to do a session of therapy, hypnotherapy. That is not a practice session. And that will be like building or affirming your already built confidence as a therapist instead of coming with more dilemmas, let's say. Now, let's also see the reason behind hoping the results will stick with giving an audio recording. Well, that is because of the reason how we know the majority of grown-ups or all grown-ups learn and get really good at something. So that is by deliberate repetition of an activity. Now, when there's a direct interest, and this ties up perfectly to what I just said about going in and working with real life paying clients in whatever form. So when there's a direct interest, uh, be it anticipation of fulfillment, joy, fun, or any kind of reward, there's more of a heightened focus on any activity, and the learning is somehow happening faster. Otherwise, also any reward included that will come over time, that we know it's cumulative gain, sorry, over time. And in other cases, it could be that when no other choice situation is introduced, which still has some kind of payoff, will motivate a person to take some action in favor of some improvements or betterment or even expansion. Now, look at this from the angle of everyday life. People are being convinced over long periods of time to take a conscious action for something, to repeat a task until they learn something, or let's say until they graduate, and it becomes an automatic thing during application then. So other examples can be when we learn how to drive a vehicle, let's say, and then it becomes an automatic behavior as we experience it or as we repeat it. But let's say if we stop driving for a longer period of time, no matter that we have driven, let's say, for a long period of time, we will still need to put some conscious effort in repeating or the action. So getting those muscles to become automatic again. So it will probably take less time the second time or this next time, but still will need some conscious repetition again. Now, it is a different story altogether when an audio recording is built or prepared to affect someone that is completely helpless consciously. And it is clinically shown to have had phenomenal effects in many cases. But as we do not speak about those cases here, but about people that can help themselves, even when they can't fully see a solution without a bit of a nudge from a therapist, in these later ones, those recordings still involve some induction to trance in them, and then suggestions that if it happens to stick, it will most of the time take perhaps much longer time than it is thought it will, if there's no urgency or skin in the game for something to stick, and that will happen if it didn't during the session. But when someone has a therapeutic breakthrough or a realization during a session, it doesn't take almost any time for something to be initiated or planted, let's say, or learned in some cases. But when it requires action, the repetition will always make it better. However, when I say repetition, I don't mean here repeating sessions or coming back for a lot of sessions, but going out there in life and practicing those possibilities. What I'm saying here is that you can really see therapy as a kind of learning too, only that it happens much faster than lifetime learnings, even though that is realized due to untangling those whatever lifetime learnings or lessons. In any case, though, if the problem has not started to resolve in the session or isn't at all touched, which would mean it still has some kind of a payoff to exist, we may repeat a suggestion or an affirmation endlessly. It will hardly work, if at all. Um, That is because there's no leverage found or lesson or things like that. Now you'll say, if the critical mind is not involved, it has to happen. Well, if it was like that, the critical mind is also not fully developed in small children's, but if they're busy playing, let's say, you can ask them do something or tell them like 100 times to do something, they will not bother doing it. Of course, until if they're pushed or forced, they will comply, which is never a good idea, to my opinion. But on the other hand, they will only get interrupted and continue their game whenever possible as if nothing has happened, and there is also short term no lesson learned there. The other thing is that rarely someone sticks to listening to those recordings, even when that is included in the suggestions, if you do not cement that conditioning firmly during the session with your client. Now, whatever it is repeated long enough, not necessarily through hypnotherapy, as I was saying, but generally in life, it will eventually become something that will create synapses in our brains that will result in habits, a way of thinking, feeling, or doing things, of course, but that is not necessarily what someone consciously wants or chooses. Now, last but not least, if the client in those therapeutic modalities that also include recordings happens that they resolve the issue in the session, in majority of cases, they will not listen to the recordings. So it's why bother? It's an extra work. And in organic conversations in hypnotherapy, as I mentioned in the beginning, instead of homework, there's some conscious tasking given that would naturally help a person to go through processing, and that is nap or sleep, possibly. Otherwise, anything that will not have them think of their problem or the session. And that is anyway what people do after a session in almost all cases. So it's really an organic tasking or conscious tasking as well, we might say. There is more to this, but for this purpose and this question, hope it serves you and you're invited to see how it works for yourself. So thanks for listening again and see you next time.